Welcome, everybody. My name is Jack Thomas. We're here at the Happy Spot. I am sitting at the Producers Club in Manhattan on 44th Street, and we have the great fortune of having Leanne from L2 Cultures and Clementina Esposito. I did want to take a moment and just talk about world events on one topic and as we see it. Trauma, terrorism, wellness. This is New York City. We're the epicenter of the world. Everyone else thinks they're the epicenter. I don't want to be obnoxious, but we're all too busy watching P. Diddy. I was sitting with a dear friend of mine the other day, and he was asking me, did you hear about some woman running around and waving herself all about P. Diddy? And everyone's reading in the news. But the part we're not reading about is, what does our wellness look like? How do we get there? We are fortunate that we have people like Leanne that is passionate with her partner in L2 Cultures, targeting corporations. We have the great fortune of Clementina Esposito's wisdom as a past professor and coming at with hard questions, and we're looking for those answers. How do we find wellness? I will share with you, when I was a child, I'm 59. I have my dear friend, Jeff Goldstein. It's about connections. When we were 10 years old, the first time we met, he beat me up in the playground. I was probably running my mouth. I probably had it coming to me, but let's talk about what's going on in the world. P. Diddy is downtown. That's a horrible thing that's going on. They call it RICO. It's not RICO. It's not. It was just bad things. Now, if we come up here on 44th Street, we're 10 blocks away. Next year, we're going to have Luigi, who went around shooting the CEO of a health insurance company and killed somebody. Vigilantism, I'm as New York as you get, but vigilantism isn't how we go about it. We're going to do this together as a group worldwide. We're fortunate, Leanne, Clementina, having my dear friend Jeff Goldstein, and we're also being supported by Mr. Joseph Medina in the background at the Producers Club. We just want to say to everybody, thank you, ladies. We look forward to learning, and so we could all be better people and not have vigilantism or running around with craziness. Let's get back to humanity and start measuring happiness.
Yes, I said thank you, Jack, and thank you for having us here at the Happy Spot. I'm going to get right to this interview because I'm just dying to dive into this. So I think, Leanne, you and I agree that one of the most powerful things we can give ourselves and each other is the permission to show up fully as we are, to honor our lived experiences, find safe spaces where we're truly seen, and from there unlock superpowers that make each of us unstoppable. My guest today knows exactly how transformative that can be. Leanne McEvoy is the co-founder and CEO of L2 Cultural Solutions, where she helps organizations create cultures that do more than just function. They flourish. She's passionate about making sure people feel safe to tell their stories, to connect to their self-awareness, and uncover the strengths that have been there all along. I'm Clementina Esposito, friend of the Happy Spot and the founder of the Clementina Collective, where no one writes alone. Everyone values the power of a well-told story, and ugly truths turn out beautiful in the end. I'm honored to be your host tonight and delighted to be here with you, Leanne.
I'm excited to be here. I'm happy to see where this conversation takes us.
I know, me too. I'm excited. So, Leanne, let's start with a belief that I know that you and I both share, right? We believe that when people feel safe and valued, they can change their lives, their workplaces, and even the prosperity they pass down through generations. Right?
100%.
100%, right? And so today we're going to talk about how to make that happen. So I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And for our listeners hearing about L2 Culture Solutions for the first time, what do you want them to know?
Oh my goodness. So
like go real basic first, like
yeah.
what is it? If I've never heard of L2 Culture Solutions, what is it?
We believe that employees should get the resources and tools that they actually need, as opposed to that one size fits all that most companies offer.
Great. Great. So, and I read on your, I took a peek and I've been reading up about you. So you help companies get all the things they want, all the things we hear about all the time too, right? Cost savings, increased productivity, engagement, retention, ROI, all that stuff, right?
Yes.
But there's one that really stuck out to me and that was innovation. Did I get that right?
100%.
And am I going to get this right too? That you get more innovation by prioritizing trust as a core value?
High trust outperforms low trust by 186%.
Jack's going to love that. It's a number, 186%. Ooh, and I think there's an 18 in there. All right, all right.
And
This
you
is
know what?
awesome.
When I talk with the C-suite or people that are tied to money, they hear that 186% and their eyes go like dollar signs. But when I talk with people that are in charge of human resources, chief people officers, when they hear trust, it's almost like their shoulders start to relax some because they know that we understand the challenges that they've been having and that we want to help them build the solution.
Wow. Awesome. So I'm going to ask a hard question because that's what I like to do.
Sure. Bring it on.
All right. So where do you begin when trust is broken, non-existent, or rightfully withheld?
So the greatest barrier to trust is fear.
Mm.
And when there are unresolved traumas, shame, lack of self-awareness, there is a blatant lack of trust. And I started my career in the business world and sales, and it was all about relationship building. And I had amazing training and I had really great mentors. So I learned the power of relationship building, which is about trust. Now, in corporate America, we know there's also a game aspect to it. So you find the people that you want to work with that share values. And then I pivoted and moved into the public sector in child welfare and juvenile justice. And I had a client say to me once, "I'm sorry, but I don't trust white blonde women from Fairfield County."
Mm.
And because you have this savior complex. And I said, "I totally get it. I get it. We've sat around the same tables for a while now. You've heard how I talk. You've heard how I present. Would you give me the opportunity to sit down and have breakfast?" And by the end of the breakfast, he said, "Well, at least you restored my faith in one white blonde woman from Fairfield County," and said, "Can I give you a hug?" So it's time. It's
Yeah.
connecting. It's validating. It's listening. It's acknowledging. And it's that connection.
Nice. Nice. In your vision statement, you say you use lived experiences as the benchmark for best workplace practices.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
And you know what? It's interesting because when we started on this journey in 2022, lived experiences were something that I was familiar with coming out of the public sector, but it's not a familiar term in the business world.
Mm.
And I used to
So,
interview salespeople and they would talk to me about their education. And I would say, "Okay, but who are you? Help me understand who you are," because that's where I talk about when you can talk about your journey and things that have happened to you. I'm going to pull out the resilience, the perseverance, the frustration, the anger, the sadness, the grief. And when someone recognizes those feelings and they realize that they came through a difficult time, it's that skill set When you can show up at work as authentic, recognizing who you are and what you've been through, yes, you've got the education and yes, you've got the experience, but it's those, as some people call the soft skills, those are the human skills that really make a person.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that. I was at the book show today in Manhattan, and some of the biggest top 5 publishing companies were there on the panel, and they were talking about what they that marketing is like the Wild West right now. But what was really funny was these like the cream of the crop CEOs going, and weirdly, some of these influencers, they just like face to camera, totally authentic, and they're killing it, they were saying how there's no, they're not as polished as they would expect, so it's interesting. We're in interesting times. So we just have a minute to break. So I'm going to hold my next question until after the break. But yes, I think what I hear you saying is something very similar, which is that the old ways of even in corporate environments coming up, uber buttoned up, uber armored up, and thinking that our grief and our joys and ourselves outside the office are something we can't bring to work.
And you miss out on the magic.
Yeah.
With that, because we're human.
Yep.
We're human. So.
Awesome. So I think we're going to be going to break very shortly, but when we come back, I'm going to be asking you if there are any lived experiences that are off limits as far as you're concerned in your
Good question.
Yeah, okay. All right, awesome.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
And we're back. Thank you for unmuting yourself, Leanne. So, okay, I can hardly wait to hear what you're going to say. So, are there any lived experiences that are off limits as far as you're concerned in a corporate culture?
It's a slippery slope. And I have a master's in social work, so I have that level of training, and I've worked in child welfare with abuse and neglect. So I'm very sensitive to re-traumatization, but also multi-generational trauma. And I think there's a way to have a heartfelt conversation without saying what the specific experience was, but just saying that there was an experience. And as we've, done a lot of our research, and I've met with people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, from all around the globe. And when I get through kind of our deck and showing our demo, I will always say to people, based on your own personal and professional experiences, what have you needed over the course of your lifetime that you haven't gotten? And I would say 90 to 95% of the time, people will say, no one has ever asked me what I needed.
Mm.
And, there are levels of trauma that it really should be a professional that is unpacking that. But what should be safe is for an employee to go to their manager or their HR department and say, I have something personal going on and I need some extra support.
Mm.
And it's not always the case in every company.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to trust, and it goes from the top down. When you have leadership that prioritizes trust as a core business value, and they prove themselves to be trustworthy, it shifts the culture of a company. It shifts how people show up. It shifts how people engage. And when you ask people what they need and you give it to them, they are loyal for life.
Mm-hmm.
It's relationship building. It's like a friendship. And you and I are developing a friendship. If I did something to betray you, you're not going to trust me. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same in business. I hate to say it's not rocket science, but it's not rocket science. But I also have a lot of human behavior education. So I am fascinated by it. And we just came through a pandemic. Leadership is not trained to manage through a crisis. And it became, we have to do whatever we have to do to keep going. And we are very intentional about prioritizing trust. And our tagline is because you matter and we care. When people feel that they matter and that their companies care about them, again, you will get 110% when they show up to do their job.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say. I mean, we know, from Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people to, Love is the Killer app, right? We have these very basic, it's like, oh yeah, business is just like life. And then yet, we very quickly realize, without trust in a relationship, there's no healthy growth, right? In a personal relationship, we know that. And yet at work, right, it seems like this is something that is so needed to talk about, this core value, right? It's like it's taken for granted that we, to do business with people, we have to trust them. And yet there are so many people walking around, that don't feel safe enough to trust the people that they work with or for, right?
And it stems from a fear. It stems from an unaddressed trauma. And when you think of toxic leaders, someone hurt them at some point, or they were raised to be a certain way and you had to be hard and cold, and that was how you were going to be successful. And in my early career, I was ruthless at times. I fully admit it. And because I was raised, you go to college, you get a job, you make a lot of money, and you're happy. And I did those things. But that level of happiness that I was so desperately seeking didn't come with more money. It didn't come with a bigger title. It only really started to come when I became a volunteer mentor and I started learning about other people and other people's lives. And it opened up my world to then ultimately build a connection with my authentic self. Took a long time, but I got there.
Yeah, so this is a beautiful segue into the next thing I was going to ask you, which is, why are lived experiences so important to happiness and well-being?
At the foundation, we're taught to love our parents. We're taught to love and treat others as we want to be treated. And I was desperate for that unconditional love, and I looked for it in all the wrong places. And it was only when I learned to unconditionally love and accept myself that I went through this transformation. And I made a lot of mistakes. I was a wild child. I had a lot of fun, but it was because I was desperately seeking that attention. And those lived experiences and those hardships that I went through have made me who I am today. And it's also really what brought me and Dr. Lori Canese together, my business partner. Neither of us wanted to go back to corporate. We wanted to do something to help humanity. And she's a career CIO and then decided to get her doctorate in organizational leadership. So we both have that human behavior component. And we started talking about what's wrong with corporate America. What do they need that they're not getting? And we're building it. We're going to fill the void. And when you tap into someone's lived experiences, like when you and I talked for the first time, it was automatically a safe space because we were introduced by Jack. I met Jack through the octopus movement, so there was common ground. But if I had a fear and I didn't have my own self-awareness and my own self-confidence, I could not have shown up as my authentic self. I would have been afraid about what you would think, about what anything that I would say, is it right or wrong? But I've done the work. I've been the people pleaser. I've been the person to say what I thought the other person wanted to hear, but I was the one that was hurt the most in doing that. And so I think about the lives and the people that I've worked in the nonprofit world, and even former salespeople. I had one that I caught up with a couple of years ago, and we worked together in the late 90s, to date myself. And he said, the greatest gift you gave me as a manager was time. You always took the time to listen. That's the greatest compliment. And I was also not as vulnerable back then because I had my own fears. But now the culture that we're building, our values, be truthful and honest, always be brainstorming, everyone gets a say, know your worth, focus with fun, inspire those around you. We're not just building this company to help others, we are building what we're selling at the same.
You're building the world that you want to live in.
Yeah.
Essentially. That's amazing. I think we're coming up on another break. But when we get back, I know that you and I talked about being black sheep. I think, in this middle segment, when we come back, I'd love to talk a little bit about that. And I'll share with our readers what that is, why I think it's important, and why I'm excited to talk about it with you, Leanne. So I think we're just about ready for break.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marsanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
All right, and we're back. So for our listeners for whom this term might be new, black sheep of the family, I know it gets tossed around a lot. Really, it comes from pastoral times, right? When there was usually one sheep born with black wool in a flock of white sheep, and it was thought to be undesirable because that wool couldn't be dyed. So it became shorthand for a person who's considered odd, rebellious, disgraced, or fundamentally different from their family by behaviors, values, or life choices. The black sheep of the family is often the one who challenges family norms, refuses to uphold unspoken family roles, carries or is assigned the burden of the family's unresolved dysfunction, or is blamed, alienated, or shamed for their difference. But often they are also the truth tellers, the pattern breakers, and the cycle enders. And they have these unbelievable strengths if they meet their destiny head on, right? They have higher resilience. They have greater self-awareness. They have more creative thinking. And they have the ability to break general cycles of trauma, addiction, and dysfunction. Research shows that they often go on to build chosen families, unique careers, or countercultural communities. So I guess the question that I wanted to ask you is, why you, Leanne? Why are you the founder of L2 Cultures? And
over the course of my career and because of some lived experiences, I have had to reinvent myself. And I am a nonlinear thinker. If someone makes one statement, I send that off into 25 different directions with different outcomes for each of those thoughts. So I'm a systems thinker. And in business, it was, of course, business systems, and then public sector, it's public systems, and assessing how they work and wanting to figure out a way for them to work better. And so everybody can thrive. And it's a challenge of the status quo. It's not accepting because this is how we've always done it. And until I moved to Connecticut, which is where I now live and have lived for 23 years, I moved every 6 years of my life. That would scare a lot of people, but it made me very comfortable with change. And change is imminent. It's coming. You're either going to be prepared for it or you're not. And I have always been proactive and wanting to make suggestions. Well, if we do it this way, what about if we tried it this way? And I've been told, no, you can't do that. And when someone says, no, you can't do that, have to prove them wrong.
Right, because not all triggers are bad triggers, right?
And it's, we had a meeting with some really senior people at one of the big 5 consulting firms. And there was an understanding of what it is that we're doing, but they're like, this is change management on a monumental scale. And I said, it is. And it's necessary and it's long overdue. And businesses have a mindset. Academia has a mindset. Public sector has a mindset. And because I've had such a nonlinear career, I can draw on lived and professional experiences that make me uniquely qualified to say, I understand what the problem is. I know there's no solution out there because legally companies can't ask the questions that we're asking. And we want to challenge the status quo. It is transformational change. And I had a doctor say to me, this is the first kind of data that I've seen that could truly have an impact on healthcare as we know it. And it is from meeting thousands of people, hearing their journeys, hearing their challenges, understanding the barriers. And the current systems, sure, they scratch the surface and they help solve some of the problems, but let's figure out a way to all work together and solve more so that people are happier, people live more productive lives, people enjoy getting up every day. And when you make a difference in someone's life and they share that difference, it feeds your soul. And I have so much of that feeding me. And I said it on a call earlier, where we're at with L2 right now, it was the pot on the stove was cold, then it was warm, then it was a low boil. It is at a fever pitch boil and the lid's about to blow off. That's how exciting things are right now with L2. It's perseverance and unconditional support of me and Lori for what we're building and finding advisors that believe in us. And we've said, listen, we're women. We don't come out of Stanford and Harvard. Women founders get less, and minority founders get less than 1% of venture capital. We have to work harder. We have to work smarter. And I am a mad networker. And it's not just win-win, it's win-win-win for the people that we're partnering with and learning from. And we are the change. I used to say in my nonprofit days, be the change you want to see in the world. But now I say we are the change.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I hear you. I think there's something that goes on in those testing grounds when we're born into places where we don't necessarily fit in. And after a time, right. And, it's just occurring to me now, actually, during our talk that, what we have in common is, our friends at the Octopus Movement, and even how literally, I started the definition with saying, that maybe the Black sheep doesn't fit in because of the way it chooses to live, or they're fundamentally different. And so I think we're learning now, more so than ever before, that people's brains work differently. And that could have been something in our early life, like our brains work differently, that just drove the people around us crazy or made us different, so to speak, right? And it's just literally, it's the way our brains work, right? And so, but I think that over time, when we realize, we have to realize it first inside ourselves with that self-awareness, right? We have to be like, wait a minute, I'm not, all the things they might say I am. right? I'm not, too much or overly dramatic, or I mean, I'm speaking the ones that I got told all the time, right? You have a fresh head, my father used to say, and I'm just, you have a fresh, like it was a bad thing. Yeah, I have a fresh head. I create ideas all the time that other people can't even think of if they wanted to, right? And so it's having to be like, wait, what you say about me isn't right. What else isn't right? Right, what else? And I think that's where, right, that creativity and that kind of little by little, when we find our people, when we find other people like us, and we start testing out our theories and we get good results back, and we're like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Right. Yeah, so I think that's what I'm hearing you say, right? Is that you started with self-awareness, and you started taking that out, into the world. And that's so amazing. So talk a little bit about you know, what kind of leader you are. How would you describe, I know this is going to be a hard one. How would you describe yourself as a leader?
I have evolved over the course of my career. And, one of the women that's helping us with sales and marketing, I worked with her years ago in San Francisco. And I called her up a couple of years ago and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm working on. And I didn't even finish my sentence. And she was like, I'm in. I want to be part of it. And I am a leader that empowers, because it's not just me, it's all of us. We are building a company. We are going to work through this problem. We are going to solve it. And I would always say, because I did a lot of sales training, don't ever come to me with a problem without a recommended solution, because it forced critical thinking. You have to be able to understand to then be able to solve a problem. And I am a leader that wants to be challenged. I am not always right. I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And I will never pretend to know something that I don't. And I have learned at this level, sometimes that scares people, because there's the perception that the CEO always needs to be the smartest. They need to know everything. And one of our advisors said to me, it takes great strength as a CEO to say something like that.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not for everybody. I don't have to be liked by everybody. And because I love me, I'm comfortable with me, and what I put out into the universe is what I attract. So I've had venture capital people in the first 2 minutes of a call, show me your deck. And I'm like, unless you and I can find some common ground, I'm not going to show you our deck. And that throws people off. And I would rather be intentional and know that the other person and I share some common ground. And, we had a call earlier with a gentleman. He just showed up as who he is. And it was because the person that brought us together has those same values. And there wasn't ego and arrogance in the room. It was, we are 4 human beings that want to be servant leaders and make the world a better place and have varying degrees of business experience. Let's explore how we might help each other. And that co-creation those types of partnerships come from being a safe space.
Mm.
And it's the beauty of unlocking human potential. And I remember talking with people from, the big Ivy League universities, and I would call my Castleton State College friends and be like, we talk differently than they do. I don't have all the big words. I'm me. And we do have fun, but we work really hard. And it's about making a difference. So back to your question, I'm a leader that empowers and works with people.
Awesome. I love that. And we're going to go to break, but that's another recurring motif today. I'm just so glad to see, leaders that are encouraging. I know when I was younger and in a couple of different corporate environments, I just I'm like a walking challenge to people and especially authority. And that definitely was, one of my challenges at work. So I'm glad to see that, things are changing, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about connection, but we're going to go to break right now. And thank you so much.
Awesome.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Ready to serve up success with a splash? Hi, I'm Bruce Kramer, aka the Corporate Cockroach.
I'm the Renaissance woman, Angie Snowball.
And I'm your strategy doctor, Dr. Mel Tapes DeSange, inviting you to serving up success with a splash.
Join us as we shake things up with real talk and real strategies centered around awareness, action, and accountability.
And yes, there really is a cocktail involved. Please join us and sip your way to success.
Serving up success with a splash, where wisdom meets happy hours. Cheers!
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 You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
All right. Hello, hello, hello. I'm here with Leanne McEvoy. Am I saying that right? How do you say your last name, Leanne?
It's McEvoy.
McEvoy. Even though it's just a little MC
Yep.
there. Oh gosh, this is such a great conversation. So in our correspondence, recent correspondence, you talked about, you mentioned, a lot of what you've been talking about, your shift towards people really is how you described it, is moving towards people. And now I understand that that's away from some of the other things you mentioned, chasing success, like so many people, when they realize, wait, that's not where it's at, right? Like success in terms of, get the job, make the money, all the things, right? Get the status, climb the ladder. And so you're turning towards people and authenticity. And I mean, as much as I'm a huge fan of authenticity, I think the word is so used now that it's like sometimes I think we have to stop and ask what it really means. And you said something else. You mentioned, you said you're an empowering leader, and part of what you want to empower people to do is to find their authentic selves. And then you quoted Brene Brown, and you said that you were struck by something she said, and that was that if we can't connect to ourselves, we can't connect with others. So I guess this is really like at the heart of what this is about for you, right? And I'm calling a spotlight to this because, you know, you also mentioned, you know, women in business, and that we don't get perhaps as much money you know, from founders and you know, yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago, I had a project with an angel investor, and I was invited to quite a few things with angel investors, and I was often the only woman in the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like at this late year, you know, we're in the 2020s. Like I can't, you know, it's hard to believe there are even still rooms where, you know, there's only one woman, but it's true. Right. And then there's also something, you know, that I know definitely happens in my field, which is that there are still these powerful forces that you know, put down the very strengths that women bring to the table. You know, they'll accuse, you know, women of writing domestically or navel gazing, you know, as if self-awareness is narcissistic, and it's almost the opposite, right? So can you say more about that, about if we can't connect with ourselves, we can't genuinely connect with others? I'd like to hear you, you know, riff on that a little bit.
Yeah. Powerful stuff by Brene Brown. And if I had heard if you can't connect with yourself, you can't connect with others when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would have said, oh no, I'm way better at connecting with others. But the way that I connected with others would be how I thought they wanted me to connect with them, so that I would be enough for them. And that was a large part of my trauma, and not feeling as though I was ever enough. And it was when I finally figured out, through some really tough situations, I got to put my own oxygen mask on. I mean, think about when you're on a plane, like secure your own oxygen mask before you secure those. And that was a big paradigm shift. And I wasn't just the safe space for others. I allowed others to be the safe space for me, which made me vulnerable. And for a long time, they'll be like, Leanne, you're really good at getting everybody else to talk, but you never share anything about yourself. And it's because I never wanted to. That was my own fear and my own shame. And it was really at age 50 that I started going through this massive transformation.
Wow.
And my college friends and I, that we've now known each other almost 40 years, they are my chosen family. And we get together every Memorial Day and Labor Day, and we laugh, and our kids, and it's a no judgment zone. Show up as you are. And I think a lot of companies and leaders can say, we want you to show up as your authentic self, but it's performative. And because if someone is going to say, I want you to show up as your authentic self, and they don't, it's performative. When we start,
there's that trust thing again, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
When we start hearing stories about leaders coming forward and saying, yeah, I've struggled with depression, hands go up around the room. Oh my gosh. Well, if it's safe for them to say it, then it must be safe for me to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And when people get that validation, it's magic.
Yeah.
And you might not see it, but that feeling that someone has, it's almost indescribable. And in that moment, when that person felt safe enough, that's what the brain is going to remember. And it's going to start to show up more. And now I know I'm too much for some people. I know that when I share some of my lived experiences, it may make someone uncomfortable because they're not ready yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if in some way I've given them a glimmer of hope into what life can be like when you start to share, that's the magic of what we're going to bring companies.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to connection, right? I don't even know how it came up for me today. I was at lunch with two people I literally just met on the way to lunch at this book fair. And we were having lunch together, and I don't know. And I was like, yeah, well, I was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, I guess I've always had it, it explains a lot about my life, whatever, and have you. And, I could see like, there was like some, it was quiet, and, I was like, whatever, I mean, I'm cool, and then after the one woman started asking me questions, and I was answering them. I'm like, actually, ever since I was diagnosed and I've been more comfortable, like saying it, it's improved every single relationship in my life. Because I understand myself so much better, and things that used to drive people crazy about me, I can be like, I know what you're thinking. I know you think I think I'm too good for that task, but actually you don't want me to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's boring, right? And the woman goes, wait, what do you mean it's boring? And I was like, oh, well, and I explained that, the ADD brain registers boredom as pain. So naturally you would move away. She was like, what, wait, really? There's brain science? I'm like, oh yeah, right. So then she started asking me all these questions, more questions, right? And how did you find all this out? And did you have a therapist? And did you read a book? And I'm like, did you A, B, C, D, E, F? And I was like, all of the above, and she was like, because my daughter has ADHD. Right. And then there was the connection, right? To like, all of a sudden, I became a lifeline to her better understanding her daughter, right? And even some of the things that she was saying about how she tries and fails to connect with her, and I was like, well, what about if you said this? What about if you tried that? And she was like, oh my God, right? So there was the real connection, right? It's not, I'm bringing a couple of the elements of what you said together here by sharing that, is to say, right, it's like, it's not just sharing for the purpose of sharing. It's about creating the space for not just being authentic for this, but for creating authentic connection.
And when you start building them, you transform yourself, and it's like someone has given you permission to come into your own. And by helping companies learn this information, and it's all anonymized, they're going to start to get insight on what their employees are really dealing with, and going to start helping them, and they are going to reap the rewards of being the company that shows employees that they matter because they care. And not everybody's going to care. Not everybody does. We're not out to help everybody. But it's almost like we're granting permission for someone to show up. We're granting permission for someone to say, this is what I need, and to make it safe to say that.
And is that your superpower, Leanne?
It is. I'm a safe space.
That's so amazing. I love that. So I know we're like almost out of time, and this has just been, thank you for so much. It went like that,
Thank you.
right? For sharing your heart and your wisdom and your vision with us today. It's conversations like this that remind us how powerful it is to create safe space, right?
And I'm excited to explore how you and Jack and I might co-create, whether it's under the octopus movement or something that has yet to begin.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So I know I can't wait to be continued.
Yes, 100%.
So I want to thank you again for being here, and for also, as you said, you know, in our first couple conversations, you also created a safe space for me to be me. And for doing that in what you're doing, you know, creating spaces for people to feel safe, seen, and supported. I know our listeners are walking away with not just inspiration, but tangible ways to nurture their well-being and build a real kind of wealth, right, that lasts for generations. So
never
watching
underestimate the
you.
cycle breaker.
Yes, yeah, right. So my gosh, thank you for caring so deeply and for being here with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been my honor.
Yay.
Thank you, ladies. We're going to be breaking. So great. And Leanne heard that. And so, Clementina, let's definitely make sure we talk later this week. Always good energy building off of what we have going on. Thank you, ladies. I wish everyone a great time. This is Jack Thomas from The Happy Spot. If you have a business, you're looking for wellness and you're looking to measure success, we're the company here to connect with the connections. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.